What if World War II was just the German War? Part 2. Previously on the German War, we discussed the fundamental aspects of this timeline. However, afterwards we eventually had to split the timeline. In a revolution against Adolf Hitler, in that timeline a breakaway Nazi party wing takes control over the state and establishes a new Nazi Reich. In this video, we will explore the possibility of communist revolutionaries overthrowing the state and the KPD ruling Germany. Stay tuned. The Socialist Soviet state of Germany. In the years that follow would be usual stuff after major political transformations, purges and political repression. But if this would be Stalin or Mao-type decades-long reign of terror or Tito-type purges for 2 to 5 years. But at that time the leaders of the KPD had long abandoned Luxemburgism and had become quite a Stalinist party, but this is not that much, so take this with a grain of salt, a slice of lemon, and a green chili. Okay, just kidding, just take it with a grain of salt. This is like predicting the reign of Benito Mussolini by looking into his socialist years before World War I. Nevertheless, let's go on with it. In the years after the German War, the SSSG, or the SSD in German, engages in a reign of terror against the population. Apart from actual Nazis, members of the SPD and other political parties and people suspected of working for the Nazis are rounded up and murdered. Camps are established throughout Germany. A secret police is set up, the Sozialistische Revolutionäre Polizei Deutschlands, Socialist Revolutionary Police of Germany, to carry out this task. Between 1937 and 1956, around 500,000 to 750,000 are murdered in Germany and 1,200,000 to 4 million people are sent to camps. Eventually, like in the USSR, the dictator will die and be replaced by a more moderate leader who reforms like Khrushchev. The SSSG might be a normal place to live now. The spread of socialism in Eastern Europe. With Eastern Europe surrounded by strong socialist powers, most of it will probably fall to socialism. Poland will become communist, the USSR and Poland split up the Baltics. Romania allies with the USSR but stays capitalist. Communist revolution in Yugoslavia and Greece, Soviet invasion of Finland. Most of Eastern Europe is now red. This would frighten the hell out of the Western Bloc, who might invade after a revolution happens in Czechoslovakia. The alternate Second World War. The Second World War would start earlier than in the new Nazi Reich timeline. The war would start when Hungary, Finland, and a bunch of other nations intervene in Czechoslovakia. After that many other nations follow suit and voila, it's a world war. Now, the Communists have a better chance of winning in this war by about 12%. The Western Bloc would fight hard in France and, to a lesser extent, Italy and Europe, with a bloody civil war ensuing in China, communist revolts dotting colonial holdings and poorer independent nations. At the end we could see most of the world adopt the socialist policy. The communist armies would probably never reach the Americas, not only because it was so far away but also since the US and Canada would be strong enough to not only crush revolts at home but also in Latin America. Britain might be able to fight to the last bullet of the last magazine of the last gun of the last man, but it still will fall to communism. Japan would fight hard, like Britain, trying to keep other Asian countries like China blue, but it would fall too. Australia might witness an attempted communist revolution but it would probably crush it, same for New Zealand. But a majority of the world now is red. The 1950s and 60s. World War II would probably happen in the 1940s, thus the 50s and 60s would be a time of peace and prosperity in the communist world. The radical and brutal dictators in the USSR and Germany will be replaced by more moderate leaders, who would carry out de-Stalinization like in our timeline. The leader of the USSR would now probably be Zhukov, while I don't know who would be in charge of Germany or other communist nations. The economy of socialist nations would do nicely in this period and things would be nice for them, imagine it as a red golden age. The Soviet economy would surpass the American one. The World International morphs into a sort of socialist UN but not quite, as it contains both communist, socialist and anarchist countries and left-wing parties and political movements, and it doesn't contain all the countries of the world. Meanwhile, this period is just a continuation of the Great Depression for the remaining capitalist nations, but worse. The economy collapses and 35% of the U.S. population is homeless. Violence erupts in Latin America while the British monarchy goes into exile in Canada. This time might be known as the years of hardship, lasting between when the war ended in 1948 all the way to 1981. Socialist uprising would be commonplace in the Americas and Oceania, and they would be crushed brutally. In response to the increasing power of the Internationale, the West sets up its own alliance, the League of Independent States. In the following years there is a Cold War between the Internationale and LIS. The 70s and 80s. The Soviet, German and Chinese economy would stay strong, but the Americans, Australians and Canadians would start catching up. Eventually the quality of life in the Western and Eastern world is about the same. The two sides start cooperating and censorship on both sides of the other is abandoned. The Internationale and LIS unite into the United Nations. The Cold War ends in a stalemate, with both sides getting along happily ever after. The end. P.S. Part 3 is cancelled because the scenario was extremely boring.